Father, we trust you, and thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to examine your word. God, we look forward to what you have to share with us today, and we pray all these things in your name. Amen. All right, well, we just got done with a series on contagious faith, and we are currently we're not in a series today. What we have is just it's just kind of like a one-shot, and this is just something that God has been working in my life and heart, and this is something that I want to share with you today. But so we just got done with contagious faith, and it's all about just reaching out to the people around you, using the talents and the gifts that God has given you to do that. And one of the things about contagious faith that was so challenging to me was that it was pushing me away from what I normally don't do. That I need to identify people in my life that I want to share my faith with, and sometimes that might be difficult to do. And the series before that was, I would say, even more difficult, to be honest. And if you remember back before Contagious Faith, we did a series on dangerous prayers. And with dangerous prayers, what we found was, we're asking God, hey, break me, hey, use me, change me, like all these dangerous prayers. And the thing that I took away from, honestly, these past few months is following Jesus is difficult. That's pretty much what I took away from that. That following Jesus is challenging, and for the previous two series now, we've covered why it's challenging and why we need to, even though it's challenging, step out in faith. One of the things that we say all the time at Living Hope Church is we want to help you take your faith step. And the interesting thing about a faith step is that it requires faith. By definition, it requires faith. Well, my goodness, wow. But what does that mean? What does that mean? Well, what that means is there might be something that you're doing that is following Jesus, but does not necessarily require faith. And what we want to challenge you to do is to take a faith step. The thing about a faith step is that it makes you step out of what you're comfortable with into a place where it is challenging, difficult, and honestly, where we see the need, we see the purpose, we see the task, and we go, I might not be able to do that, and God, you probably need to come through if you're going to see this work. And so what I want to challenge us today with is simply this, and this is something that God's been working in my heart for a long, long time. What is it? It's we have God-sized purposes, and then we see who we are, and we see our limitations. And as we look at both of those, what I want to encourage you today to do is to step out in faith, trusting in God that He will accomplish the task. And so we are going to be in the book of Exodus. My college students, you are well aware of this already. In our college series, we are going through the entire book of Exodus, to be honest, and we've already covered this here. But college students, don't check out because I believe that we all need it. And so Exodus 3, we're going to be looking at this monumental moment where you have a guy named Moses, and if you don't know who he is, just watch Prince of Egypt, or Christian Bale, Let My People Go, or basically The Dark Knight with Moses. Anyways, but what we're looking at is this guy named Moses who was a Israelite who got raised up in really the palaces of Egypt. But through a process of failures in his life, which is murdering somebody, that was one of them, at age 40, he fled, and he went out into the wilderness. He got married there, and then he started tending to some sheep for 40 years. And at age 80, then he was tending to, not even his own sheep, it was his father-in-law's sheep. And God comes to him in a burning bush. And we see that was the start of God calling him to not just do something ordinary, but to do something extraordinary, to liberate his people from the bondage of slavery into a place flowing with milk and honey, into the promised land. This whole entire Exodus kicks off with this scene with the burning bush. We're not going to cover the entire book of Exodus, it'd be too long, but what I want to see is we want to cover just this moment where God's interaction with Moses God's task with Moses, and Moses' perspective, God's purpose, and then our path forward. Moses' perspective, God's purposes, and then our path forward. And so look with me with Exodus 3, starting verse 1. It says this, Now Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led his flock out into the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, it was burning, but it was not being consumed. And so here was the introduction where God showed himself to Moses. And we see as we continue through it that God says, hey, you're on holy ground, so take off your shoes. And so God's here. And what we're wanting to see is we want to look at Moses' response to all this. God's going to share with him, hey, I want you to liberate my people, the people of Israel, out of slavery from Egypt into the promised land, and I'm going to use you, Moses. And so a lot of depictions of Moses is really interesting when you look at films and stuff. How does Moses respond? Well, I'll tell you how he doesn't respond. Let me just give you that for a second. So tall order from God, God-sized purposes, God-sized task was placed on Moses. And Moses didn't look at that. He didn't go, well, God's about time. Let me strap up my gadgets. Here we go. That's not what he did, okay? He didn't go to God, and he didn't say, well, I'm the man to do the job. Thank you for choosing me. That's not what he does. And what we see throughout this whole entire interaction is Moses is consumed with his limitations. That Moses is consumed with his limitations. And let's take a look at this for a second. So verse 11, it says this. And Moses said to God, Who am I that I should go to the Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? Who am I? And so what he's seeing over there is that he's seeing his own self. I am a Jew that was turned Egyptian, turned murderer, turned exile, and then now I'm just a lowly old shepherd out in the wilderness. Who am I to do the task that you are requiring me to do? God, I'm a nobody. I don't have the tools. I don't have the skill set. And so he looks at his own life and he says, I'm not it, God. And he goes on and he says this in verse 13. Then Moses said to God, if I come to the people of Israel and say to them that God, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what's his name? What should I say to them? What he starts doing now is he starts looking at the details. He's saying, hey, I'm not the guy for the job, God. But if I am the guy for the job, what exactly am I going to say? What are the details? I need some credibility here because I am just nobody in the middle of the wilderness, and I need something to at least give me a little bit of credibility. God, what are you going to say? I'm not it, and then I'm also not the guy. I need the details, God. I need the details. And I don't want to just step out here and put my faith in something when I don't really know what's going to happen with me. And then there's a lot more that goes on to that, but we're going to look at one last interaction of Moses' perspective. And we see in chapter 4, verse 10, it says this, and Moses said to the Lord, "Oh, my Lord, I'm not eloquent either in the past or since I've spoken to your servant, but I am slow in speech and of tongue." And he's not saying over here that he can't communicate, because clearly he's communicating right now. But what he's saying is that a lot of scholars believe that he actually had a speech impediment, that there are personal limitations, there are the details and the limitations that I can do with that, but then there's also physical limitations. My physical limitations, God, I'm not the guy for the job. And as we look at Moses' perspective for a second, and as we see God's tall task that God has placed on Moses, what we see is there's a God-sized purpose, and there's human limitations. And what does that equal? It equals something impossible. And here's the thing, Moses is right. Moses is right about this. Moses is a guy that, yes, he was born as a Jew, but raised in the palace. But he's since lost all of his credibility. And not only that, he's not at a zero, he's really at a negative. That he don't have the credibility to give to the people of Israel. He doesn't have the credibility to give to the people of the Egyptians. And what we see here is that he's not only at just a zero, he's at a negative because he actually murdered somebody and just went into exile and fled. And to our purposes, to our standards, God wouldn't use somebody like him. And it's true. God-sized purposes plus human limitations equals what? Something impossible. And here's the thing. I grew up in a full generation with everyone telling me, go achieve your dreams, you can do it. So I remember when I was growing up, the TV show that I used to watch all the time is Blue's Clues. The real one, the one with Steve. And so not the other one, Steve. Okay, we're talking about Steve here. Some people thought he was a drug addict, who knows? But so as we see this, I was growing up like in watching Blue's Clues, and at the very end of every single episode of Blue's Clues, what does Steve say? Steve says, with me and you and my dog Blue, we can do anything that we want to do. And I look at that, and I just went, no, Steve, you're like 140 pounds, bro. It's like you want to be like a linebacker in the NFL, you're not going to be able to do that. I'm sorry, your dog's not going to help you with that, and I'm not going to be able to help you with that. I'm sorry, Steve, you're not going to be able to do it. You're over here, you're a college-age bro in an imaginary world with your imaginary friends, and your dog over here is apparently the only one that doesn't talk. You're like, you have the salt, the pepper, they all talk except for apparently Blue. And so I'm sorry, if you put your mind to it, you can't do it all. What is the purpose here? Big purposes, human limitations equals something impossible. And so if you want to make something possible, Steve, you know what you want to do? Lower your task, lower your purposes. Steve, if you want to, I guess, make up more imaginary friends, that's possible, Steve. That's possible. You want to go be an accountant? Yeah, I guess you can do that too, I guess. You want to be somebody but there are certain things that are physically impossible you can't do. And as I was growing up with that message, just taught all my life, you can do things, you can do this, you can change the world. And then I start living it out, and I go, and I can't do this. I can't do this. And what we see here is my limitations. If I want to do something possible, I need to lower my standards. I need to lower my standards. Because then I can at least do something achievable. What is the thing that we say all the time? Make SMART goals. We want to be specific, specific, measurable, obtainable, realistic, timely. That attainable part, that's the one. You got to make it obtainable. And so we see that. And you know what I'm blinded by all the time? And you know what I'm focused in all the time? I'm consumed with my limitations. Consumed with my limitations. And here's the thing. With the task that we've placed to you over the past 2 months, hey, have that contagious faith. That God might want you, and God might be calling you to change your family. That God might be wanting you to change your dorm room. God might be wanting you to change your workplace. And we want to have that contagious faith, but you look at that tall order. God might want you to forgive somebody that's your enemy. And you look at all of that, and you go, man, that's impossible. With my skill set, I'm not able to do it. Who am I, God? And if you really want me to do it, what are the details, God? But I'm not equipped. I'm not ready. I'm not physically there. I don't have the potential. I am limited, God. I'm limited. And so my message, we can stop right here and this would just be a boohoo message. But here's the thing. This is where the beauty comes in. Because what we see next is, yes, Moses' perspective. But what we're going to look at is God's purposes. And so let's look at how the Lord responds to Moses, okay? And this should encourage us. Here we go. And so let's go all the way back. Exodus 3:11 says this, but Moses said to the Lord, who am I? Who am I? And what we want to see here is verse 12. And God said this, but I will be with you. I will be with you. Moses, you're missing one key ingredient to this equation. That's me. Moses, you're missing that one key ingredient. I will be with you. And this shall be a sign for you that I have sent you. And when you brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain. And so notice what God doesn't do. You ready for this? This is what God does not do. God does not look to Moses and go, who are you? You're the best. You're the best, Moses. That's why I'm choosing you. That's not what God does. He doesn't affirm Moses. He's like, oh, no, Moses, it's okay. You need to have a little bit more self-confidence in yourself, Moses. Come on. Like, hey, I created you so that you can do all of this. You got the power in you. That's not what he does. That's not what God does. God, what does he do? I know that, Moses. Who am I? Yeah, I know that. But Moses, you're asking the wrong question. You should be asking, who am I? Who is the Lord? Because I will be with you. Let's move on to the next one. And it says this in Exodus 3:14. It says that God said to Moses, I am who I am. I am who I am. Say to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. I am has sent me to you. And so God said to Moses, say to the people of Israel, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and thus I am to be remembered through all generations. I am who I am, Moses. This is a really interesting illustration just to clarify what in the world God is saying here. Moses is saying, okay, so if I'm going to go out to these people, I need to know who has sent me. So who are you? That's his question. And the Lord literally just says, I am who I am. This is just imagine for a second. Let's say I call my wife, and I call my wife, and somebody picks up the phone that's not my wife. And I go, okay, this is weird, first of all. But anyways, and so I'm like, hello, is Renee there? And then this person asks, who's asking? I'd be like, that's a little weird. I'm like, I'm her husband. And if this person replies, which one? I'd be like, the only one. Unless I missed something. But what do we see here? God is saying, essentially, God is saying, Moses is saying, hey, who are you? And God says, I'm the only one, Moses. I'm the only one, the God of heaven who created all of heaven, all of earth. I'm the one, and then I'm the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You know, God could have made different people on his little roster. You know that, right? God could have made, I'm the God of Enoch, the guy who walked perfectly in his entire life and was, we're not going to go into that, but you could have done that. God could have been, I'm the God of Moses, man. The guy who built an ark for me. And when everybody else passed away, Noah. Noah was the guy that I called. You gotta be like one of those people. That's not what God does. We see that he says, I'm the God of Abraham. Guy was a complete mess. God of Isaac, who was even worse. God of Jacob, who was even worse. Why say those? Because I'm the God who made a promise to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. I'm the God who keeps my promises. I'm the God who's going to carry you through this. Moses, do you believe me? I am who I am, and there's no one besides me. And then he says one last thing. Chapter 4. And so Moses said to the Lord, oh, Lord, I am not eloquent, either in the past or since you have spoken to your servant. I'm slow in speech and tongue. I love God's response. Let's move on to the next one. The Lord said to him, who made man's mouth? Who made him mute or deaf or seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now therefore, go, I will be with your mouth and teach you what you shall speak. We see again, what does God do? Or what does God doesn't do? God does not say, no, all you need is some just skills and coaching. I got you. You're going to grow up to be the best speaker alive. No, he doesn't do that. God says, yeah, I know. Who do you think made you? I think so many times in my life, I see in my life, there are so many limitations in my life. I'm forgetful. I am so sporadic. I don't plan things, all of these different things. And I look at my limitations. I'm not the best athlete out there. Some of y'all know that. I can't swim, different things. I look at all of these limitations, and I go, God, I'm not it. I'm not it. And you go and you look at your limitations and you say, God, I wish I had this, because then I could do something great for you. Or I wish I had this type of personality, or I wish I did this. God, why didn't you make me to be all this? I remember a guy, his name I didn't ask him for permission to say this, but I'm going to say it. But I remember a guy in Arkansas when we're in college ministry. Dude, his name was Kevin Frisbee. Just think about this for a second. Kevin Frisbee. What a name. And dude had like a full-blown beard that was like just majestic. I'm like, I can't grow a beard. And then he was a star athlete, rocked out the basketball court. Like, it was crazy how good he was, really. And he had a good voice, and he could play the guitar. I'm like, how? Like, those two things don't go together, bro. And I just look at my life and I go, oh, if I was only him with all the talents, then I could do something for the Lord. And God's saying, I know, I made you. And why did I make you with limitations? So many times we think that our limitations are a curse. But God is saying, I made you with your limitations, because through your limitations, I will get the most glory. So Michael Jordan, 40 points per game, fine. Michael Jordan, 40 points with the flu, incredible. And what we want to see is the limitations that we have in our life. God uses it to get him glory. Why? Because 2 Corinthians, and this is the verse that we started out with, 2 Corinthians 12. We got a guy named Paul who had a thorn in his side. He had a thorn in his side, and we don't know what it is. It might be physical, probably not. Might be just something that was bothering him. It was physical limitations for him. He was trying to serve the Lord to the best of his ability, but he had this limitation. And 3 times he prayed to the Lord, and he said, can you take this thing away from me? And this is what God says. My grace is sufficient for you, that my power is made perfect in your weakness. Therefore, this is Paul's response. I will boast. I will tell others all the more gladly about my weaknesses. Why? So that Christ's power may work and may rest inside of me. That our limitations that God has placed in our life is so that we can look to him and say, God, I can't do it on my own. I can't. And so if you're wanting me to take this faith step, God, will you come through? God-sized purposes plus human limitations equals something impossible. God-sized purposes plus human limitations equals something impossible. But you know what? God-sized purposes plus human limitations plus God equals something incredible. Equals something incredible. And so as we wrap up, what does this mean for us? What does this mean for us? Go out there, change the world? No, not yet. But maybe change your world, your own world. That God might be calling you and saying, hey, I want you to change your workplace. Hey, I want you to change your friend group. Hey, I want you to change your athletic department. hey, I want you to change your dorm room. I want you to change this campus. I want you to change your family. And yes, I know it's going to be hard. It's actually probably going to be impossible. But I want you to do that. And so what is it? Identify this, first of all. What is it that God is calling you to do? And so don't just go out there and just say, yeah, I'm just going to change the world. Let's start with your own world. Start with your own world. God has given us his word. And so are we following his word? One of the things we want to go, so many times for me, I just want to say, I want to do big things. I want to do great things for the Lord. And then I'm not excelling at what God has already given me. Let's start there first. Let's start there first. Are you reading your Bible? Are you praying to him? Are you surrendering to him every single day? Are you joining yourself in a biblical community where we can grow together? Are you sharing your faith with maybe one person? Let's start there first before saying, hey, I'm just going to change everything in my life and the world around me. That's not, let's start here. Let's excel at the revealed things. Moses was a shepherd for 40 years. And what he didn't know is that shepherding was leading him to shepherd an entire nation afterwards. Let's start here. But not only that, maybe for you, you don't know. And you just want to enter the story because you don't know that you're in God's story. And you know what? You want to be a part of it and you want to be used by God. And so let's do the next thing. Let's examine ourselves and our weakness and our limitations, our sin that's in our life. Here's the truth of the matter. Eternity, the way that we get to eternity is not through our own works. It's through him alone. And so our greatest limitation in our life, guess what? Is sin, separating us from God. And God said, hey, I'm here. I'm going to sacrifice my life so that I can give you life. And I can give you forgiveness of sins right now. If you have not placed your faith and trust in Jesus alone for your salvation, today can be the day. Look at your limitations. Look at your weaknesses and see that God has covered all of it. God has covered your sin. And you can trust him in that. And that will pave the way for you to eternal life. Do you trust him in that? Entering that story requires faith, but then also stepping out in obedience in faith every single day. What if every single day you just ask, God, what is a faith step that I can take today? What is a faith step that I can take today? I understand my weakness and my limitations, but God, can you help me to have faith in you? And trust in God's grace and power. And really the last thing is, we didn't read this, but Moses couldn't do it alone. And the great thing is that God gave him someone who can help him out in speech. So don't do it alone. Take somebody with you. God-sized purposes plus our own human limitations equals something impossible. But what I want to see is us to step out in faith and see God-sized purposes with our human limitations plus God. And let's see something incredible. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much for today. Thank you for giving us this time. I pray that right now that as we continue to look to you, God, that you would change our hearts, change our mind, change our lives. And God, we trust you. I know over the past few weeks, even in my life, that I've seen so much of my limitations come out. God, that I can't do it alone. And the task that you've called me to do, God, it's impossible if it's not for you. God, the task that you called our church to do, to be a church that plants churches, God, with who we are, God, we can't do it. We need you. And God, the task that you called each and every single one of us to do, to maybe step out in faith and change the world around us. God, it's impossible. And maybe, God, we would step out today and say with open hands, I depend on you. So I'm calling on you because I can't do it on my own. I need you today. We pray all these things in your name. Amen.